G'day, my name is Nick, and in today's diorama, we're going to take on a pretty epic project, I think. I've got this massive dead and preserved Malaysian tarantula specimen, and we're going to transform it into the great spider Shelob from Lord of the Rings. I've always loved taxidermy dioramas ever since my uncle gifted me these display cases for my 13th birthday. So now I thought it'd be incredibly cool to recreate that iconic scene from Lord of the Rings, where Sam confronts Shelob and saves Frodo. The preserved tarantula is definitely going to be the star of this diorama. We'll pose it as if it's ready to attack, while crafting a miniature Sam wielding the phial of Galadriel to fend her off. I've already hydrated the spider, which means I can now pose it without causing any damage. We'll use a foam mounting base and some needles to achieve the perfect attacking stance. These needles are just a guide for the pose and won't actually puncture the legs. To finish it off, I'll use some wire to position its fangs and front legs into the attacking position. The fangs on this tarantula are absolutely massive. I was really surprised at how big they were. Now, it's going to be really important to let her dry out completely. And you know what else is super important these days? Protecting your online security. And today's video partner, NordVPN, can help you do just that. They're not just a VPN service, they're a cybersecurity powerhouse that can protect you from all kinds of common online threats. Take man-in-the-middle attacks, for instance. Imagine you're at your favorite cafe, using their free Wi-Fi to check your emails. Sounds harmless, right? Well, not always. Hackers can set up fake Wi-Fi networks that look legit, but are actually traps to intercept your data. Then there's phishing, a tactic where scammers will send you messages or emails that look like they're coming from trusted sources. They might ask you to click a link to verify your account or reset your password. But the moment you do, they've got you. Your credentials are compromised and your accounts could be at risk. That's why I've been using VPNs for years now. With NordVPN, your online traffic is encrypted, making it much harder for criminals to get their hands on your sensitive information. Plus, their threat protection feature can recognize malicious links and warn you about dangerous websites, keeping you safe from phishing attempts and other online threats. NordVPN has hooked me up with an exclusive deal for you guys. Head over to NordVPN/NixBuilds and you'll get a special offer on a 2-year plan, plus 4 extra months on top of that. It's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. That's nordvpn.com/NixBuilds for the best deal you can get on NordVPN right now. Stay safe out there, and let's get back to the build. With Shelob all mounted and posed, I'll leave her outside in the sun for a couple of days to really dry out and let that pose secure in. And in the meantime, I can get started on the base. To get started on the base, I'm first going to sandwich a piece of XPF foam between 2 sheets of plywood. I'm using such a thick piece of foam because I want to create a little cave section underneath the diorama, and you'll see why at a later stage. I hot glued a couple more pieces of foam onto the top of the base just to build out some of the shapes, but I actually removed some of these later on the build. To bring the treacherous steps of Cirith Ungol to life in this diorama, I've got these thin slate molds. I'll cast them using some plaster of Paris. This technique will create some really realistic rough-hewn stone steps to capture the dangerous descent that Sam and Frodo faced. To secure the steps onto the base, I'll use some sculptor mold. First, I'll cover the foam section that we previously glued down with some sculptor mold. This material serves 2 important purposes. First, it will allow us to press the plaster steps firmly in place, ensuring they're securely attached to the base. It also creates an uneven, realistic ground texture for the rest of the diorama. The Sculptamore will conform to the shape of our steps, while also filling in the gaps between them. As it dries, it should form a pretty natural looking rocky texture that will perfectly mimic the treacherous terrain of Mordor. For the rocky walls of the passage, I'm going to be trying a new technique using this foam roller. I'll first make a cut into the foam and then tear away chunks. The splits between the pieces create quite a natural looking rock texture, which I'll refine by cutting and pulling away at the surface. After prepping a bunch of these foam chunks, I'll secure them to the base using some hot glue. I found it was actually a pretty good way to build up the cavern walls and give us that cramped rocky feel of Shelob's lair, without, overcomplicating things. Now, we'll add some fallen rocks and pebbles around the eroding passage walls. First, I'll glue down some larger lava stone pebbles along each wall. This mimics where larger stones would naturally erode and accumulate. Once the bigger chunks are in place, I'll continue applying pebbles and sand in decreasing sizes along both the ground and walls. This gradual sizing creates a realistic buildup of debris that you would naturally find in crumbling passages like this. With all the rocks in place, I'll glue it down with some watered down PVA glue. To create an underground passage, I'll use this modified vape with a hot wire to cut into the foam. Once I've carved out the tunnel, I'll treat it just like the above ground section and coat the interior with some pebbles and sand to match the textures that we've already established. We can now start on the paint job. I'll first give the whole diorama a base coat in black. Next, I'll come in with some sepia and dark green inks. These aren't meant to be super obvious, but they'll create some subtle undertones on the rocks. Once I've airbrushed in the inks, I'll come in with a dark grey on the plaster steps just to really make sure that they stand out from the rest of the rocks. I'll then dry brush progressively lighter and lighter shades of grey across all the rocky surfaces. To add just a touch more depth and variation to the colour, I've got this light brown chalk powder which I'll dust into some of the cracks and crevices. I'll then tone that back with some green and black oil washes, continuing those washes across other areas of the diorama. Now, to really sell the creepy and dangerous environment that this place is, I'm going to scatter about a whole bunch of different bones and skeletons from Shilov's previous victims. Getting started on the little skeleton bits, I'll give them all a coat in some sandy bone colour. I can then come in with some silly putty and mask off the painted bone, so I can then airbrush in some metallic paints on the armoured sections. I accidentally here, as I was removing the silly putty, I snapped off his head, so I just had to quickly glue that back on. With all the pieces now base coated, I'll mix up a fresh batch of oil wash. To create this, I'll simply squeeze out some black oil paint into this metal jar. I can then dilute it down with some mineral thinner. Applying this wash across the entire skeleton, the mineral thinner really likes to flow down into all the cracks and crevices. Once the wash is all dry, I'll come back in with some sponges and remove the pigments from the raised areas, giving all the bones a weathered and old appearance. I've been thinking about doing some custom dioramas, so if you're interested in something like this, get in contact with me. I can now secure all the skeletons and armor pieces onto the diorama using some PVA glue. I was trying to stick them into sort of places where I felt like, these skeletons will naturally sit and sort of erode away. I definitely wanted to add a lot of skulls to the diorama. The scene from the Lord of the Rings movie doesn't have this many skulls and skeletons sitting there, but I sort of wanted to make mine a bit more unique and different from the movie. To fully secure all the little terrain bits onto the base, I have some slightly watered down PVA glue. This will then spread around all the pieces, and once it's dry, we'll secure them all down really strong. With the terrain pretty much all done, I can move on to starting the paint job on Frodo and Sam. I'll start by giving them a base coat in black and then coming in with a white highlight. I'll then start progressively building up the skin tones and then coming in with my brush and building up all the different colours on his clothing. If you're enjoying the video so far, it would really help if you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos and helps it get pushed out in the algorithm. With all the painting done, I can now glue Sam's sword hand onto his body. I want to have his other hand holding the glowing phial of Galadriel. To achieve this, I'm going to have to create a mold around the hand and then cast and secure an LED light into. I purchased these micro LEDs from AliExpress, which are going to be perfect to create the light source. The first step in building this mold is going to be securing the hand onto a few toothpicks and a cut down shot glass. This shot glass will both hold the hand in place and also contain the silicone mold. I'll now mix up some 2-part silicone and pour that into the mold. After about an hour, I can demold this hand. This should leave a cavity in the silicone, which is a perfect replica of the 3D printed phial of Galadriel. To cast the hand, I'm going to squeeze some UV cure resin into a syringe. I can then inject this syringe deep into the bottom of the mold and fill it from the bottom up. This should mean no bubbles get trapped inside the mold. I'll then carefully place the micro LED into the resin. I can then trap it in there using an ultraviolet torch to cure the resin. I can then carefully remove the hand and get it painted. I can now feed the LED wires through a hole that I cut in the body of Sam in Blender. I'll then glue the hand to his body using some super glue. Now, I definitely should have done this step before the train building, but I need a hole that goes through the center of the diorama and out the side. So I'll just have to drill a couple holes. This was actually so much harder than it looks on camera. I spent a couple hours trying to get those holes to line up and getting the wire through then. I was too frustrated to even film out of it. So yeah, you'll just have to take my word for how annoying it was. After gluing down Frodo's cocoon body, I want to add a bit of spider webs across different parts of the build. For this, I'm going to be using Green Stuff World Spider Serum. I'll add a bit of this serum into my airbrush and then begin to spray it over different sections of the build. The liquid sort of dries mid-air and creates these thin, wispy spider webs. I'll focus on adding a little onto the top section and then covering the tunnel section more thoroughly. And of course, the main reason why I created this tunnel was to add in Gollum, who is scheming and all to get the pleas that his plan to kill Frodo is working out. I'll once again get him painted up and then secured down on the subterranean section of the build. Now that the base is complete, it's time to prepare Shelob and get her ready for mounting. While she was drying out, one of her legs actually snapped off, so I'll carefully glue that back on first. I want it to look like Shelob is like lunging mid-air about to attack Sam. To achieve this, I've glued a rod into the back of the spider. I can then insert this rod into a pre-drilled hole at the back of the stairs section. Mounting like this should allow us to position Shelob dramatically and suspended in mid-air, as if she's just leapt out at Sam. After getting Shelob mounted into the diorama, it is finished. If you think this build is cool and you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It really does help. And comment down below if you have any other ideas for some interesting dioramas in the future. Now, check out the reveal.